Republican Seniors of Minnesota, a group of seasoned seniors that learn and discuss issues important to all Minnesotans, featuring guest speakers with traditional conservative values, plus Republican candidates at all levels, pledging strength and optimism. We believe in and advocate for the principles of personal responsibility, economic prosperity, peace through strong national defense, and limited, sensible government. Republican Seniors of Minnesota. It's not the years in your life, but the life in your years.
Terry, you're on. Welcome. Good morning. Yeah, good. Thank you. Welcome. Thanks for coming this morning. And a special welcome to the people who are attending us via the video live streaming. I'm Terry Flower, Chair of the Republican Seniors of Minnesota. This meeting is being live streamed today by our volunteers with livestreampros.net. And you can view the video live on our website or on YouTube or Rumble or your smart large screen TV. And you can just ask us how if you have trouble making that happen. We also want to say hello to the watch parties. So can you join me and say hello? Hello! Hello! Yeah. Okay. I was looking for a lot of veterans to come dressed up, and I did that too. An old flight suit. You ought to understand that you got Velcro here to make them still fit. Yeah. Before we do anything else, today is Veterans Day, and I'd like to acknowledge the veterans. I don't know what services everybody was in, but I'd like to just could you stand up, Army guys? Yeah. Navy. Yeah, stay standing. Navy. Marines. Semper Fi. Coast Guard. Air Force. Yeah. Space Force. Anybody from Space Force? And Merchant Marines as well. And please, while you're standing, how about all of our active or retired police officers, firefighters, and other first responders? You stand too? Look, we got almost half of the room full of people who actually are veterans of these occupations, but you know what? They were supported by somebody at home. So if you're married to or live with somebody, you stand too? Because that should take care of most of us. Okay, and would the rest of you stand? And we'd like to have an opening prayer. Gracious God, we celebrate this month two very special holidays, Veterans Day and Thanksgiving Day. Veterans of all the forces could only have been able to do their duty with your guidance and protection. Some of them have made the ultimate sacrifice, but all of them have struggled for peace in this world. We pray that you continue to enable them to patriotically serve this great country. We pray that you bring those protecting our freedoms all over this globe home again to a cheerful crowd and the arms of their loved ones. We pray, too, that this great nation continue to be blessed with your love, and we give praise to you forever and ever. Help us to live your gospel, for we ask this in the name of Christ Jesus, our Lord and Savior. Amen. And while we're standing, could we make the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. We got just a few announcements. With Carol is one important one you should be aware of.
Good morning. I'm Carol Brumwell, your past chair. The board asked us as a group to work towards having credit card payment available for donations if you want to kick in a dollar or two for watching a video, or for memberships when you are not at the meeting yet. So we have made those available. Our Republican Seniors MN.com website has a donate button. On that donate button, there's a space where you can click and you will be taken to our donation page where you can put in a credit card. You will then be able to choose either a membership for a couple at $50 or as an individual at $30 or any other dollar amount you care to donate. We're delighted to have this option. We did choose to not have card payment for the meeting fees or for membership when you're signing up in the room because it takes an extra amount of time to do that credit card page, and we didn't want to slow down you being able to get into the room. But again, delighted to be able to offer that. If you want to avoid the line, if you have not gotten your 2026 membership yet, you can do that online now from RepublicanSeniorsMN.com and the donate button. Thanks.
Thank you, Carol. And I just want to tell you what we hear from the office of the state party is that the legislative auditor released a damning report exposing financial mismanagement inside Governor Walz's own office. The audit revealed sloppy accounting, late vendor payments, how do you do that? And missing financial controls, basic safeguards that any competent operation should have in place. And no wonder we've got fraud. And while the Minnesotans are struggling with the higher taxes, the Blue Line light rail boondoggle has just hit $3 billion and counting. And that's $1 billion over budget and years behind schedule. Do you think we could cancel that sucker? You can't make this up. Well, anyway, meanwhile, what we've had going on in Washington is our two state senators, Amy Klobuchar and Tina Smith, voting no 13 times to keep our government shut down. So we need a change. We'd like to continue on and go to take a look at birthdays and celebrations of life. First of all, are there any birthdays, anniversaries, or special celebrations out there in the audience? One.
Next week is my 71st birthday. Today is my 18th year of sobriety.
God bless you. Did you have one too?
Microphones.
You got it?
November 28th, day after Thanksgiving. It's your birthday? Yes.
It's on
November 28th is my birthday, day after Thanksgiving.
Great. Congratulations. And I saw earlier B. Westerberg running around with a sweatshirt that said, don't trust an old woman born in November. Well, yeah, whatever that means. But I think I'll trust her. Okay, let's see where we are. I wanted to mention just briefly, we are celebrating this month Thanksgiving Day, and of course you know that Thanksgiving was proclaimed by Abraham Lincoln. And let me read you the quote from here from his proclamation. A day of thanksgiving and praise to the Almighty God, the beneficent creator and ruler of the universe. And he goes on and on for days. And this was done on the 20th of October in 1864. Well, that's all well and good. One, we know we're expected to give thanks, but don't forget the praise part as well. I think we recognize that. But the reason I bring this up, though, is because there is a Minnesota connection. 2 years earlier, who was governor then? 1862. On October 3rd of 1862, Alexander Ramsey. Okay, Alexander Ramsey was our Minnesota governor, and there is his proclamation, and he called for the same thing, to give thanks and give praise. And so I just a personal recommendation to you when you enjoy your Thanksgiving dinner, wherever it might be, also give thanks and give praise as well. And recognize that Minnesota connection, too. I'm not saying that Abraham Lincoln plagiarized this or anything like that. I'm sure they talked together about it, but it does recognize that it's something that's important for all the people of Minnesota and of this great country. Bear with me, my thumbs are catching on every page. Okay, we have our early speakers today, and the first one this morning of our candidate, State Senator Eric Pratt, is running for CD2 congressional seat. Eric?
Thanks, Terry. Appreciate it. Well, good morning. My name is Eric Pratt. I am a current senator down in Scott County, but I'm running for the open congressional seat in the second in Congress down in the 2nd Congressional District, the seat that Angie Craig currently occupies. I could talk a lot about my background, but really I want to focus, since I've only got 3 minutes. I want to be very quick, and thank you all for inviting me to speak today. When I think about what Veterans Day means, I'm the son of retired Army Captain Ray Pratt. We lost Dad in April due to Alzheimer's, but I know he was extremely proud of his service. And 2025 we commemorate the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II, and I think for many of you the 50th anniversary of the end of the Vietnam War. And to all of you that served, thank you very much. I'm so honored to be here. My campaign is really going to focus on 3 key platforms. One is strong families. We need to help our families afford the costs of life. We saw under the Biden administration that inflation and affordability were outside the realm. I mean, we saw generational inflation. We found out just over this last month that the Affordable Care Act is unaffordable. And families need to be able to take care of their health care needs. But we also, and you know, it really comes down to the basics. Most CD2 families, most families in Minnesota want a good job. They want to be able to provide for their families. They want to be able to put something away for retirement, put something away for their kids' education. And as a former banker and chair of the Jobs Committee in the Senate, I've done that. We want a strong economy. You know, I think President Trump's done a good job of trying to help make American business more competitive. And we need to continue that. Making sure that we help our companies become more competitive. You know, the world is more prosperous when the United States is the leading economy in the world. And China is nipping at our toes, and we can't let them overtake us. We have to continue to push that. But what I really want to focus on today is the third platform, which is strong communities. And that really comes down to having a strong country. For all of you that served, you put your life on the line. You didn't know if you were going to be asked to pay the ultimate sacrifice, but you stood for faith, family, and freedom. And that's a debt that we owe you. So we have to take care of our veterans. I'm glad to see that we finally have a secure border, that we've stopped the flood of illegal immigration across our border, and also stemmed the flow of fentanyl across our border, helping our young people. But I think one of the things I want to be able to do in Congress is to be able to support a strong and the most advanced military. Because just as the world is better off when we're the strongest economy, the world is safer when we are the strongest force in the world, when we are the world leader. Because we know Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, they're after us. And we have to be able to defend ourselves and our friends. Because otherwise we will fall into tyranny. Otherwise we will fail the men and women who serve this country to defend our freedoms. And as your congressman, that's what I intend to do when I get there. And with that, it looks like I'm going to run out of my 3 minutes, and I'm happy to take any questions. I think we're going to offer some Q&A. Oh, I stunned the place. I made you silent. Yes, sir.
Have the Democrats announced a proposed candidate to replace Angie Craig, who's running for Senate in Tina Smith's spot?
So as you mentioned, Angie and Peggy Flanagan are running for Tina Smith's spot, which has opened up. There's actually 3 Democrats running for that seat. Current Senator Matt Klein, who I serve with. Matt was there and was the deciding vote on spending the entire $18 billion surplus and raising your taxes $10 billion. Former Senator Matt Little, who voted with Tim Walz on every occasion to keep our schools and our businesses closed during COVID, and Representative Kayla Berg, who is a far-left progressive and has been part of not only spending the deficit and raising your taxes, but really pushing a far-left agenda. Any other questions? Well, thank you all for having me today. Oh, yes, ma'am.
What is the proportion of Republicans versus Democrats versus unaffiliated in your district that you have to overcome?
That is a great question. I don't know the exacts, but I got some ideas, right? So when you look at the 2nd Congressional District, they come up with rankings on, you know, whether you're a strong Republican or a strong Democrat. Right now, the ranking shows that the Democrats hold about a 3-point advantage in the 2nd Congressional District. Quite honestly, that's in the margin of error. That's why this is a winnable seat. Because when you look at the families in the 2nd Congressional District, I'd say probably 36% of them are Democrat, 34% are Republican, but the other 30% are independents. They're swing voters. And those are the voters that we've got to attract, and those are the voters that I have attracted when I've run in my Senate campaigns. And that's why I'm really focusing on those 3 items, right? Strong economy, strong families, strong communities. Because that's what the families of the 2nd Congressional District care about. That's what keeps them up at night. I just saw a video from a couple of my DFL opponents talking about how great it is that, before the Senate came to an agreement to reopen the federal government, how great it is that they're standing up, and then another one afterwards, oh my gosh, it's awful that we caved to Republicans. They were using our most vulnerable citizens to extort, spending billions of dollars. And it's just wrong. And I think the people of the 2nd Congressional District realize it's wrong, because we have at its heart, they're conservative families. They just need a candidate they can vote for. And I think I'm that candidate.
We do too.
Thank you.
So we know that President Trump is closing our debt through tariff revenue, but our national debt is still way out of whack. Do you have any ideas of how to lower that further?
Oh, I'm going to step on your speaker's toes here. One of the things that I looked at was, in just a short period of time, DOGE was able to save over $200 billion in wasteful spending. And rather than just have it be a short-term, one-and-done type of thing, I really think we need an ongoing DOGE function that reports to the Congress, because they control the purse strings. So that's one of the things that I'd like to take on when I'm in Congress.
We all went to the Tea Party meeting last week, and I was shocked when the one gentleman said that Anoka, or the Republicans, had lost by 88 votes. And I mean, to me, it made me sad that, I guess you envision yourself voting and everyone else, being enthused and can't wait to, make a difference. But I don't know. I'm going to remember that number 88 for a long time.
No, that's a great point. We can't win if we don't show up. That's the fact, right? Yeah, I mean, our district, the 2nd Congressional District, might have a 3-point advantage. But we've got to be able to show up if we expect to close that gap, because we just hand it to the Democrats if we don't do that. In fact, there was a race where over in Shakopee, we lost it by 14 votes. There were 400 absentee ballots that were sent to Republican voters in that district that didn't get returned. They requested an absentee ballot and they didn't return it. We could have won that seat by 400 votes instead of losing it by 14. That's how important it is that everybody get out and vote and make your vote count.
Redistrict in Minnesota before 26?
Do I think the Democrats are going to try to redistrict before 26? No, I don't. I don't think our Constitution allows for that here in the state. But also, we do have a tie in the Minnesota House where we have an equal number of Republicans or Democrats. And I think both sides would work hard to stop that. I do think that we are underrepresented as a party in the state of Minnesota. When you look at the map and you see how much of Minnesota is red and how much is blue, I think we are underrepresented. So I think the Democrats are afraid that we'll pick up some seats, and we're certainly not going to try to gerrymander any. We're not going to agree to gerrymander any seats to allow them to pick up any new ones.
I don't live in your district. I live in Rochester, but I noticed something that Angie Craig did that I thought was quite brilliant. She was somehow able to get some law enforcement people to endorse her. So I'm hoping that you can flip that around, and they should not be, no law enforcement person should be endorsing a Democrat.
From your lips to God's ears. No, actually, I've had a great relationship with law enforcement over the years. In fact, I've had their endorsement over every election for the Senate, and I'm hoping to get it again. One thing I was very active in was when the defund the police crowd changed the law on school resource officers, and 88 districts ended up pulling their school resource officers out of their schools. One of them was my home district, Prior Lake Savage School District. We went without a school resource officer in that building, and we saw in a couple of those scenarios where we saw some really violent actions happen, places where school resource officers didn't necessarily have to get involved, but they were able to be on the ground and be a presence to prevent bad actions. One of the things that I'm going to be taking on this year in the Minnesota Senate is trying to make our schools safer. I'm not gonna give out the secret sauce yet, but we do need to make sure that we haven't had a death in a school due to fire since 1958 when we put in fire building codes, and so we want to do that same thing for schools and make sure that our schools are safe and our kids are safe, but not have them be in a prison. Thank you. That it's still a good environment to learn. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it. Have a happy Veterans Day.
Thank you. Okay, we have another candidate, and that would be Nate George. Nate is running for State Office of Auditor.
Thank you very much, and again, happy Veterans Day to everyone. Going on 20 years in the Air Force Reserve come January, so looking forward to earning that title veteran myself. Thank you very much. So yeah, I downed a whole cup of coffee so I could talk really fast and make these 3.5 minutes as meaningful as possible, so try to keep up with me. My name's Nate George. I'm running for State Auditor, one of 2 GOP candidates. They have a whole bench on the DFL side, but we're not here to talk about them. I'm a father, a husband, father of 5, I should say. I live up in Braham, Minnesota, which is just north of Cambridge, and where I'm the mayor currently. As I mentioned before, decorated combat veteran of almost 20 years in the Air Force Reserve. I was an anti-terrorism officer, combat logistics expert, and currently I'm stationed out in Hickam, so I fly out there whenever I have to do my drill and whatnot as a strategic war planner. So when we're talking about things going on with China and North Korea and Russia, I'm right in the middle of that. So we could talk for days about that stuff. But full-time, I work for the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe. I'm their Director of Licensing and Investigations for their Gaming Regulatory Authority. So if you've ever lost money at Grand Casino, thank you for paying my salary. I appreciate that. Very kind of you. You put food on the table for me. So so my job is to make sure that those casinos are following following state and federal Indian gaming laws. And so regulation, government regulation, investigations, auditing, it's what I live and breathe every single day, and making sure that people are doing what they're supposed to be doing, especially when it comes to people's money. As the mayor, I was involved in completely turning around our city's financial situation in just a year. We were almost $1 million over budget, We were about 30 grand in the hole in our cash reserves when I came into office, and the previous outgoing administration just approved a 48% property tax increase. So that's the situation I walked into. And so within a year and a half or so, we were able to completely turn that around. We dropped the property tax levy down to 2%. We now have a $1.3 million fund balance in our general fund, and our cash reserves are up to 50% of our general fund, and the state recommends 25. So we've done we made a lot of progress, and part of it is just not being afraid to get your hands dirty, call out the fraud, waste, and abuse for what it is, and address it. And that's what I'm here to do. Fraud is a very big buzzword right now, but what you don't see is solutions. And there's a lot of candidates going around right now giving some false information about what the state auditor's office is really responsible for. And people are just eating it up because it's the hot topic of the day. But I'm here to educate people and let people know what the state auditor's office really does. And that's because I have the direct experience doing it every single day. When I took office as the mayor in Braham, we uncovered significant fraud and misuse of public funds from the previous administration, city assets and money going towards private uses, and mismanagement of the budget that was leading to our financial crisis. And those are the kinds of things that the state auditor's office looks for. And so when you look at these constitutional offices, you want to put people in them that know what they're doing. We can't take these positions for granted. In addition to that, the state constitutional offices all sit on the executive council. Who here knows what the executive council is? One person. That's the most hands I've seen raised when I've asked that question. So kudos to you, sir. The executive council is the one that makes all the decisions and votes on all the executive orders that the governor tries to pass. So he can't just simply write up an executive order and say, here you go. He has to present that to the executive council, and they vote on it. So the state auditor sits on the executive council. It's a given. It's not an appointed position. So the state auditor, despite focusing on oversight of local governments, they have a say in executive action and the things that the governor does. Somebody mentioned COVID earlier. All those executive orders were voted on by the executive council. So we need to take these positions seriously and make sure that we're putting right candidates in there. And I think that'll about do it for my time, if I'm not mistaken. If I am, I'll open it up for Q&A and dedicate more time for that. Sir,
I'm coming.
Mike's coming to you.
If I remember right, the state of Minnesota the general public voted to do away with the treasurer. And I'm wondering what's your opinion of that action. We no longer have the executive council being a treasurer and so forth, and they could control the money being spent by the governor. Right now, we don't have that control, and we depend on the auditor to do that, and it's kind of a lonely position to be in. And I'm just wondering what's your opinion of the fact that we did away with the treasurer that we elected.
Yeah, so that's a great point. The state auditor's office used to be responsible for all kinds of things back when it was first implemented. And over the years, it kind of took pieces of it away and made up or spread those duties out amongst other agencies. The legislative auditor being one of them. The legislative auditor's office is the one that really has oversight of state. The state auditor primarily oversees local government. So you're talking about cities, townships, counties, school boards, and a very small portion of state agencies that receive federal funding only. So issues that involve federal funds and misuse of those, they have oversight of that. Otherwise, the legislative auditor has oversight of the state. And that's why you see a lot of the information coming out right now coming from the legislative auditor's office. And so I think the strongest part for the state auditor position is that with it still being an independently elected position, even if there's a member of the state auditor's office and the governor's office who are from different parties, the state auditor can still use their platform to let the public know what's going on in the governor's office. And so when you see things like the reports that are coming out now, which we shouldn't be surprised about at this point, leadership starts at the top, and they create the environment. So if there's an environment of fraud, it's likely coming from the top. But they can put that message out to the public and use their position to let the public know what's going on, even if they don't have a say in it. And sitting on the executive council, they can be that sole no vote sometimes. Executive council meeting minutes are 100% public. Anybody can go online to the executive council website and see what they talked about, how long it lasted. Being that everyone's in the same party right now, they last about 10 minutes. Yeah. And that's even if Keith Ellison shows up to vote on anything. But you can see what they're talking about before it gets implemented. And you can see how the executive council is voting. And so even if the state auditor, if I'm lucky enough to be your state auditor and everybody else on the council is a Democrat, I'm at least the Republican voice. And the public can see that. And then they have the ability to ask questions. And the state auditor office has its own public and media department, and they can use that platform also to put information out to the public. Because it's about your tax dollars. It's not about the party. And we need more candidates that think that way. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Is there any recourse for people that live like in a community like Bloomington where our taxes keep going up and there's no transparency in our city government for really where the money's going? Can you help with that? No, I suppose.
The short answer is it depends on what's going on. But what you can do is any member of the public can submit a tip to the state auditor's office and have the state auditor look into suspicions or allegations of fraud or misuse of public funds. The state auditor's office also has the authority to, without notice, do on-site inspections or investigations of the books. So they can respond to a tip that way. And so it just depends on if there's just a lack of transparency, then that might be something more related to government data practices laws, and you would go to the Office of Administrative Hearings for that. If there's a lack of transparency because they're hiding fraud, then the state auditor's office would absolutely be involved in that. That is their primary function. You bet. Sir? Anything else? All right. Once again, Nate George, running for state auditor. Would appreciate your support. Thank you all.
Thank you, Nate. There is one more candidate here who's not speaking this morning. John Nagel is running for the seat in CD5. He'll be available in the back of the room during our three-minute break and afterwards. Sir? Yeah, running against Ilhan Omar. Yeah, good. So with that, your 3-minute stretch is starting right now.
You're watching Republican Seniors of Minnesota. We'll be right back.
for the freedom and the people we love, for the bravery you showed and the fortitude you held, for the days of dedication and the nights of devotion, for the miles you walked and the skills you learned, for the months of training and the years of service, for the memories you carry of the battles you saw, for the legacy of your courage and the honor you deserve. When our nation needed you most, you answered the call. A deep and unshakable sense of allegiance and responsibility. You were bold, you did not hesitate, and you did not walk away. You were gone for holidays and anniversaries and birthdays, because while we were living in peace and freedom, you were fighting for it. Thank you is not enough. We can't repay you, but we will promise to remember. You are the reason we can sing the land of the free and the home of the brave. You are the heroes among us. You are not forgotten. You are the veterans. We remember your courage. We honor your sacrifice. And we thank you today.
If you notice, the screen says your time is up. So if you could be taking your seats right now. Okay, folks, time's up. Have a seat. We are pleased this morning to have with us John Phelan. He's an economist at the Center for the American Experiment. Now he's talking about Minnesota DOGE, or however you pronounce that. Doge, okay. Anyway, we're talking about cutting the waste, saving the budget, and what if our Minnesota had our own Department of DOGE? So we'd like to thank John for coming this morning.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Before I get into the talk, I want to say a big thanks to the tech guy, because I give this talk all over the state, and everywhere I go, the tech setup is different. Somebody out there somewhere is going to invent one thing that plugs my laptop into a projector, and they will make $1 billion because it will solve all my problems. And so I want to say, I just tell you one story. I gave a talk like this a couple of years ago to a BPOU in Pequot Lakes. And I turned up, and I went up to the lady at the counter, at the door, and I said, I'm John Phelan, I'm here to give the talk. I need to speak to the tech guy about getting set up. And she goes, oh, go inside, you need to speak to so-and-so. He's the one in the red hat. So I walked into this BPOU meeting in Pequot Lakes, and every single person in there is wearing a red hat. It was like she'd asked me to find Spartacus at the end of the movie, you know. But I found him in the end. So it all went ahead. Just to give a quick introduction to us, some of you may have seen this talk previously. We kind of took this around the state over the summer because I'm sure you're all aware that Minnesota's got big problems with its state governments. Things are kind of out of control. And we point a lot of this out. You know, we write this stuff on our website every day, kind of holding state, local governments, occasionally the federal government to account. But one of the things that you always get is people say, well, you're always complaining, you're never offering any solutions. So eventually we sat down and thought, okay, let's actually, calculate some solutions, put some numbers on this so that we actually do have, this is what we would do. This is how we would fix Minnesota's problems. Center of the American Experiment, we've been around about 25 years. Some of you may be familiar with our work, some of you may not be. But we are primarily a state-based and state-focused think tank. So most of what we deal with is state-based legislation, state-based stuff like that. More and more is county stuff, and I think that's something that's going to grow, and that was part of what I'm going to talk to you about today. We do occasionally deal with federal matters, some things like energy or whatnot. You really can't avoid playing at the federal level in a subject like that. Let's just try to figure out where I need to point this.
We'll go forward here from here, figure it out.
Okay, there we go. Okay, so I think maybe it's this one. So anyway, what we did is we did a lot of polling a little while ago. We kind of commissioned a polling firm, and they're based in somewhere. So there we go. This is because I praise the tech, right? So this thing sat there, it's like, not yet. Okay, so we have this pollster, a guy called Rob Autry. They're a very respected polling firm. And we bring them in kind of once a quarter to ask Minnesotans particular questions because it really helps to kind of figure out, where are the people of this state. Because very often you can kind of get stuck in a silo and you think everyone thinks like you. But you've got to kind of get some polling and figure out what people really do think. Funnily enough, it's actually encouraging, if that's the right word, quite often. So this is a question that we ask kind of as a baseline thing. We ask it fairly regularly so we can kind of track it over time. I'm going to try and bring this talk in about kind of 40 minutes or so, 35 minutes. So I'm going to try and leave some time for questions at the end. But the first question that we ask with this pollster is, does Minnesota state government spend too much, not enough, or about the right amount of money? So the number that say too much has risen from 36% in 2018 to 48% in 2025. So that's a 12-point increase. That's like a 25% increase there. So that's pretty impressive. So we're seeing that people really are starting to get sick and tired with kind of runaway spending at the state government. I'm curious to know who's in the blue bit, who thinks we're spending, I'm not spending enough money. Somebody. Anyway, what percentage of state spending do you believe is wasted? The median answer is 33%. So your median Minnesotan thinks 1/3 of state government spending is wasted. Now, honestly, I don't know that I put it that high. There's a lot of John Galts out there, apparently. This is an interesting one. We asked, how much fraud and waste is acceptable as a percentage of your paycheck? Less than 5% gets 78%. So this is people who said less than 5%, 3%, 2%, 0%. There are people in this blue category who think more than 5% is acceptable. So there is some kind of irreducible core of people who are just kind of lost, I think. But anyway, this is one of those issues. The reason we poll this is a big issue. This is a real concern for Minnesotans. This kind of chimes in actually with polling that other organizations have done. So KSTP, they did a poll where they asked Minnesotans, what are your big concerns? And the third concern, actually, after the economy, kind of a big broad brush one, and healthcare, was fraud in state government spending. So when you talk about fraud, when you talk about, abuse, and some of it, at some point you've got to start talking about fraud, which is something done to you, and start talking about corruption, which is something you are complicit in. That's a big issue. And it really matters to Minnesotans. And so when you raise it, when you talk about it, and people say, oh, it's just a talking point. No, it's not. It really matters. Because there's a lot of people out there, as you know, with the cost of living and all the rest of it, struggling to make ends meet. And when they see all these crooks, binning off the system, we fed 10,000 children from a, shoe locker or something. No, you didn't. That the money is gone. And that one of the reasons people are having a hard time making ends meet is because they're being taxed and they're being squeezed to pay for all these fraudsters. And that's wrong. So this is a big issue for Minnesotans who have a real innate sense of fairness. This is kind of a quick overview of the state of Minnesota's economy. This gives you some idea of kind of the overall picture. And this is a chart that's really, really striking, I think. Once upon a time, the GDP per capita is a kind of really standard measure of economic welfare between countries, between states. It's a good measure of the amount of resources per person that there are to be, consumed, invested, something like that. And if you see here, this is GDP per capita in Minnesota minus GDP per capita in the United States. So you'll see right back there, this is kind of the premium that you get for living in Minnesota. Okay, so the weather might suck. The sports teams may be rubbish, but you get more money. Your income on average is higher. And if you look back here, something like, the mid-2000s, GDP per capita in Minnesota was $4,973 per Minnesotan, higher than the U.S. average. Right now, you times that by, 4 for a family of 4, and you're looking at some serious money. That's not far off $20,000. Okay, so there's a real economic boost to living in the state. Now, you bob along here, even as late as 2014, it was $4,658 per Minnesotan. Again, times that by 4 if we get a family of 4. Look what happens after 2014. It falls every single year. And that's because in every single year since 2014, GDP per capita, that key measure of economic welfare, has risen in Minnesota more slowly than it has for the United States generally. And we're kind of the worst performer on this. Okay, we're the worst performing state in America. So that in 2024, for the first time on record, GDP per capita in Minnesota was below the national average. We're now a below average state in terms of economic welfare. And that's kind of bad, and that's happened in a very short space of time. 2014, bang, in just 10 years. So that's kind of a problem. Now, you have to ask yourself, why is that? Well, if I'm looking at this, I'm thinking, what happened in 2014? And so one of the things that did happen in 2014 was a big tax hike. Governor Dayton enacted a new top tier of income tax in Minnesota, which now gives us, as you see here, the 5th highest top rate of income tax in the United States. Now, it's sometimes quite difficult to measure and compare these things. And I'll give you an example here. Minnesota, 9.85% top rate. California, 13.3% top rate. Okay, so that looks like California's doing way worse than we are. Except we apply that top rate on a much lower level of income than California does. California, you're not paying that top rate until you're earning something like $1 million. In Minnesota, you're earning something like $180,000 and you start paying this rate. So this is kind of this comparison is bad. It's probably not as bad as it should be. But this is one of the things that we think drives that down below the national average. Sales taxes. This is an interesting one. The sales tax, we have the 15th highest combined rate of state and local sales tax in the U.S. So we're not in the top 10. We're a bit further down. Now, this is an interesting one because as an economist, the sales tax is kind of my favorite tax. I don't like any tax, but the sales tax is not the worst one, according to the textbooks. But if you look at this here, it's an interesting one to note. This is one where we're kind of below average. And also another thing about this that makes the comparisons difficult is we impose the sales tax on the rates on a relatively narrow base. So Minnesota exempts a lot of things from the sales tax that other states don't. Now, there was an attempt in the last legislative session, Governor Walz had the idea of broadening the base of the sales tax so that it would cover more things. I'm not necessarily against that. Broaden the base, lower the rate is kind of the, economist's mantra. And he had this proposal to shave, an infinitesimal amount from the rate and, expand the base of the tax quite broadly. So it actually amounted to a fairly big tax hike on Minnesotans. So we oppose that principle. We oppose that particular policy. So what I would say here is this rate's not that high, but keep an eye on it because they are trying to raise it. Corporate income tax. We have the second highest rate of corporate income tax in the United States. Now, this is an interesting one because, you raise this and people say, well, we've got a lot of Fortune 500 companies headquartered here. Yeah, we do. And they're all the same companies that were headquartered here in 1973. I looked into this and you can trace every single one of those companies back more than 50 years. We're living off the past. Okay, and one of the things about this is this corporate tax, if you've got some huge multinational that's based in Minnesota, you only pay that 9.8% on your Minnesota operations. You don't pay it on what's going on elsewhere. If you're a Minnesota business, a smaller business, you cop this rate on everything. Okay? So again, it's another one of those kind of tricky things there. One thing I would say is look at the states that are up with us. We've got Illinois, California. I mean, these are not necessarily the states that you want to be in the company with, There's a great book out at the moment called Abundance. It's kind of a wonkish book. I've got a review in the forthcoming magazine. Maybe save you reading the whole thing. But this guy, he makes a good point about California. And the guys who wrote this book, the two of them, they're both liberals. And they both say everybody in California, everybody who runs California, the governor, statewide officials, they're all Democrats. And Democrats should be able to point to California and say, vote for us, this is what we'll do. Instead, he says, conservatives point to California and says, vote for them, and this is what they'll do. And so you look at this here, see the states that we're in the company of. This here shows you the state and local tax burden as a share of state income. This is from 2022. It's Census Bureau data. It's the most recent year that there is available. It allows you to compare apples to apples across states. You can see that Minnesota ranks 12th there. Look at the states above us. You've got New York is the highest. Not a state whose economic policies you really want to copy. Hawaii, Hawaii, okay, you pay tax to live in Hawaii, right? I've seen the Elvis movies. I wouldn't mind living in Hawaii. You've got New Jersey up there, California. So real blue states. It's real hardcore blue states that are higher than Minnesota. But here's where the kind of rubber meets the road, as they say. And this shows you the net migration rate in the U.S. from 2019 to 2024. This is Census Bureau data. So very often when you see these migration numbers, you see the raw number, like 800,000 people left California or something like this. Which, okay, that tells you a lot. But to kind of make it more comparable, what I did is I take those raw numbers and adjust them for the size of the state population so that you get a rate rather than a raw number. And it doesn't really change it a great deal. What's kind of interesting, if you look down here, look at the states that are losing the most residents. It's the ones we've been talking about. New York, Hawaii, California, Illinois, New Jersey. These are hardcore blue states. New York is just hemorrhaging people. So New York's a state with a big population and a big rate. So that tells you how bad their problem is there. California, same thing. Big population, big rate. If you look at the top and see the states that are gaining residents, Idaho. Now, again, if you look at the raw numbers, Idaho's not gaining that many people. That's because it hasn't got that many people. If you account for the size of the population, Idaho is the number one destination for Americans moving from one state to another. I need to go to Idaho and figure out what they're doing. All I know about the place is potatoes. South Carolina second, Montana, Delaware, Arizona, Florida, North Carolina, Tennessee. So there's a real difference there. It's kind of blue states and red states. There's a big difference. This breaks down Minnesota's net migration by age. Because when you point out these migration numbers, one of the things that you often hear is someone say, well, it's just retirees leaving, don't worry about it. For retirees leave, it's kind of a problem because increasingly older people have got, the spending power. And so that's kind of a crazy thing to say. But it's not even true. So many of these things that you hear in state debate aren't even true. So this here shows you the net migration by age. This is data from the IRS. So this is the age of the primary taxpayer in a household. And you'll see that we lose residents in every single category, including those under 26. And if you look at this here, 55 under 65, this is at 45 under 55. I just moved into that category this year. These are people in the prime of their working and earning lives. If you look at someone's age and their income on a chart, then the average American, they start off when they're like 18 or something, they're working in Dairy Queen at the weekends, and they're not earning a great deal of money. And as they go through their lives, they earn more and more and more and more and more until they hit 65, and then the income kind of drops, you know. So when you look at this, try and imagine that line superimposed on this. And what that shows you is that, you know, we're kind of, our biggest loss is in the people with the biggest incomes as a matter of age. And that's not good. So when someone tells you it's just retirees leaving, it's not true. This is another one, and this is a crazy thing that I've had said to me. When I talked about these migration numbers, I've had people say to me, I kid you not, well, it's just rich people leaving, don't worry about it. Well, these are the same rich people who are apparently going to pay for everything, and it's not a problem when they leave, you know, riddle me that. But when you look at this again, it's one of those things that's not true. This is the same IRS data. They break it down also by the income of the primary taxpayer in the household. And this shows you the red bars are where we lose residents. Minnesota loses residents on net in every single age category above $25,000 a year. So we're not talking about Rockefeller or John Paul Getty or somebody. We're talking about middle-class Americans. You know, we're losing everybody in a $25,000 income category and up. We gain residents in the income categories below that on net, from $25,000 on down. So that's where Minnesota's population, I mean, we're not growing population from migration because we have net out migration, but we're offsetting some of the higher income migration with lower income migration. This here, I want you to bear this in mind. This is a really important chart for everything we're going to talk about later, as we go through the talk. This shows you state general fund spending from 1990 to 2029. It's in billions of dollars. It's adjusted for inflation. So you'll see that it kind of chugs up and up and up. There's a big bump there with the Great Recession because you have to balance the state budget. And it goes up there, carries on this upward trend, and then wallop. You hear that red line there? That's that historic, wiggles his fingers, Democrat trifecta that we had in 2023. And they went crazy. Okay, they were like sailors on shore leave. They really were. And we've gone, sorry, I just realized there's a bunch of sailors here. You're great guys. But yeah, so you've got this here, massive spike in spending. Inflation adjusted, huge spike in spending. What's really important, perhaps, for what we're going to talk about is the dashed line on the end. That's the forecast. So this is all based on the most recent forecast of Minnesota management and budget. When I talk about cuts and reductions as we go through the talk, I want you to remember that very often what we're doing is not, you know, people will say when you talk about these cuts, you know, you're going to wage war on the widows and orphans, as though we're rolling the clock back to the kind of, you know, dark days of Charles Dickens or something like that. That's not true. The proposal that we lay out still leaves state government spending higher in real per capita terms than in any year before about 2022. You know, so that's just kind of how out of control the last couple of years have been. So very often what we're talking about is not some massive reduction down to here, but just bending that dotted line down, where it's not a question of cutting the level so much as reducing the rate of increase. And that's a really important thing to remember. This here just kind of lays this out a little bit more. This is the state budget is structurally unbalanced. So you'll hear, you know, at the end of the last session, oh, we balance the state budget. You know, they kind of shuffle some money here, shuffle some money there. Yeah, okay, they balance the budget-ish. But the underlying problem has not gone away, which is the fact that spending outstrips revenues as far out as the budget process goes. So $1.9 billion is the deficit in the 26-27 biennium, and that rises to $2.2 billion in the biennium after that. So this is a problem that hasn't gone away. It's going to come back next year. It's going to come back the year after that until we fix the structural imbalance of spending being higher than revenues and increasing at a rate faster than revenues. So how are we going to fix this? Today's topics, we're going to talk about DEI, everybody's favorite, diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're going to talk about non-profits. We're going to talk about K-12 education. We're going to talk about health and human services, which is welfare. We're going to talk about public safety. We're going to talk about energy and the environment. And the Golden Turkey Award, which is one of the least coveted things in all of state politics. So the first one, we'll start with DEI. We looked, we had a guy, an intern, who contacted all the state government agencies, and he emailed them and says, how many people do you employ full-time working on diversity, equity, and inclusion? This is one of the favorite ones that we had. The Department of Education employs a culturally responsive arts, education, arts, and equity system specialist. Imagine saying that at a dinner party, The dessert would be coming round by the time you're finished. So how do you fit that on a business card? Look at this. So, this is the kind of thing that there's people throughout state government being, paid to do kind of basically non-jobs like this. And remember, this is not fraud. This is actually the state government appropriated the money to pay someone to do this, and that's exactly what they're doing. So this isn't fraud. But if you tell someone who's, they get into the checkout at Walmart and they look at their bill and they have to put things back because they haven't got enough money to pay for their groceries, you tell them this isn't ripping them off, and I don't think they're going to take it too kindly. Anyway, when we added up kind of an average salary across all the various DEI appointments that we identified across state agencies and the U of M, we reckon you can save $31 million if you just can all these things. So it's not huge. It doesn't actually make kind of a huge dent on where you are, but it's a start. Every little helps, as they say. Again, our polling. We asked Minnesotans, do you support or oppose closing state government DEI offices and reassigning state employees working in DEI initiatives? 43% support. Which kind of, on one level, that's, it should be higher. On the other hand, it lets you know that your pollster isn't just telling you things you want to hear. So it kind of makes the whole exercise more robust, in my view. And finally, it tells me that we've got more work to do. Here's an interesting one. Do you support or oppose an effort to reduce the size of the state government workforce? 53% support that. So consider this, 53%, 43%. There are 10 percentage points of people who think we've got about the right or not enough DEI employees, but also want to reduce the size of the state government workforce. Who are these people? I have no idea. If anybody knows, answers on a postcard. Let's move on to non-profits. Now, declaration of interest, I work for a non-profit. There's an awful lot of non-profits in the state that get money from the state government. Mine is not one of them. I'm quite glad about that. It's kind of crazy. It never used to be the case in Minnesota that non-profits got money direct from the government. Money would be appropriated, and then non-profits would have to go through a bidding process to get that grant or whatever it may be. That's changed now, and increasingly, you see situations where the name of the organization is written into the law, or where, as in the case of the Uber Lyft fiasco, the law is written in such a way that it basically describes one organization in Minnesota. So it just guarantees them a clear run at the brass ring. So we asked Minnesotans, should we require all grants to nonprofits go through a competitive process with more oversight and accountability? 80% said yes. So this is one of those issues that kind of cuts through and reaches across. Because if you think, Minnesota, it's kind of 50-50 politically. We're not so blue as people say. We're kind of a 50-50 state. So when you see a number like that, 80%, you've got a lot of progressives there. You've got a lot of independents there. This is one of those things that if you push, it can bring in interest from across the aisle. We asked here, do you support creating a new office of Inspector General to investigate and prosecute fraud in state government? 72% of Minnesotans support this. This is crazy because there was actually a bill last session to do this. It passed the Senate with bipartisan support. House Democrats scratched it. They would not spend money on this. They said $9 million, that's too much. We can't possibly spend $9 million fighting fraud, which is, being penny wise and pound foolish, I suppose, being charitable. But yeah, so that's crazy. Hopefully that bill comes back up next session, and I can't imagine why anybody would be against that. We asked here, support for incentivizing state agencies with more funding if they uncover fraud and waste. This is my colleague's idea. Honestly, I hate it because I don't want to incentivize people with more money because they figured out that they were wasting some. But anyway, government will find ways to get money. 67% of people, Minnesotans polled, support this. We say if you reduce non-profit fraud, you can save $250 million. So that you're getting to get some proper numbers here now. This is an interesting one. We asked, this refers back to what I just talked about. Do you think the 2025 Minnesota legislature has done enough to strengthen efforts to prevent fraud in state government? 64% said no. The rest of them must have been asleep. I don't know. But this is kind of crazy. This is another one of those numbers. It's a big number. So that means you're getting lots of progressives, lots of Democrats, lots of independents joining conservatives in that red slice of the pie chart. Move on to education now, because really the whole thing comes down to two areas in the state budget. There are two areas of spending that account for about 70% of all state government spending, and that's K-12 education and welfare. This here kind of makes that point. You'll see here, so we've got, various areas of state government spending, higher education, property tax, tax aids and credits, and they just bounce along. They're basically about the same as they were in 1990, adjusted for inflation, this percentage growth. If you look at these lines here, the blue line for HHS, that's welfare, the red line for education, and you'll see that that's where the increase has been. What you will see with education, I think, is interesting, is that the line basically kind of drifted up until about 2013 and then stopped. So really, education spending has not really grown that much in the last 10 years or so, and isn't really forecast to grow too much. If you're looking at the dotted lines, it's the blue line, HHS, welfare. That's where we're going to start seeing some really big numbers. But that doesn't mean that we can skip over like 30, 35% of the budget. So we've got to look at education. This is an interesting one. This kind of is like the chart that we saw before. This breaks down share of general fund spending by category. 1990 versus 2029, the forecast from MNB, don't forget. So you'll see here, in 1990, education accounted for 32% of state government spending. By 2029, that will have risen to 38%. So 6 percentage points. Maybe not a huge increase, although it's kind of interesting to note that this is happening at a time when our student population is not growing all that quickly, as we will see. You'll see here, though, HHS, from 21% of state government spending in 1990 to 38% of state government spending in 2029. So that's a 17 percentage point increase, a near doubling of the size of the share. That's huge. So really when we're talking about just ballooning state government spending, it's HHS that you're talking about. So several things that you can do in the education space. One of the things is remove inflation from the K-12 funding formula. So one of the things that K-12 funding has is it's built into it that it rises automatically with inflation. I understand you've got to keep the kind of real terms where it is. But I do think that if you're going to increase spending, you should vote on it. Go on record and vote on it. And don't just sit there and let Jay Powell and the Federal Reserve pump it up for you. This here is an interesting one. This shows you employment growth in various areas. As I said, if you look at the number of students since 2003, the number of students in Minnesota up 3%. The number of teachers in Minnesota up 9%. That's not so bad. You go here, look at this. Principals and assistant principals up 28%. That's nothing. District administrative staff up 285%. I couldn't believe this because there's this kind of huge jumps in the numbers. You know, you download the numbers and this is what they are. You know, I checked this myself. I kicked the tires on this, and it's there, and it's crazy. And it's one of those things, you know, you puff up the employment numbers, you puff up the union numbers, you puff up the union dues, you puff up the union political contributions to certain political parties. So everyone kind of gets happy off this, apart from the taxpayer. So keep an eye on that. That's a real big problem, we think, in K-12 education. And we think that if you reduce principal growth in K-12 schools to the rate of the student population increase, you'll save $25 million. If you do the same thing for admin growth, you'll save another $21 million. Okay? So we're starting to see some numbers here. And we asked here, again, we polled on this, support for requiring school districts to limit the growth in admin staff to the growth in the student population. 64% of Minnesotans polled supported that. So I think again, remember, you know, this is a number that's taking in lots of people who aren't conservatives, lots of independents, lots of liberals, lots of progressives. We've got others in here. There's so much of this that I just have to kind of blast through these every now and then. The Minnesota Youth Council, scratch that, you save $750,000. Ethnic Studies grants, get rid of those, you save $1.7 million. Grow Your Own Teachers of Color grants program. Get rid of that, it saves you $86.8 million. The Per-Pitch Center for the Arts, $17.4 million. Get rid of that. And that actually was a Golden Turkey nominee, I gather, at some previous point. Yeah, keep an eye on that. The miscellaneous K-12 education cuts altogether save you $107 million. So we're starting, remember, we're bringing that number down. We're trying to bend down that line of increase. And this is one way that we can do it. Other things, the North Star Promise, free college. Scratch that, it saves you $99 million. You know, this is kind of wacky, you know. The old idea that you pay your way through college, apparently not anymore. But that brings us to human services, you know, HHS, welfare. If you are the budget-cutting Jonah, this is your white whale. Or Ahab, sorry. Getting my whales mixed up. So yeah, here we are, human services. This, as we saw earlier, this is the huge one. This is the really big area of increase. Human services includes medical insurance coverage, including long-term care, Medicaid, Children's Health Insurance Program, Minnesota Care. It includes cash assistance, welfare cash assistance, general assistance, Minnesota Supplemental Aid, includes child care, MFIT, basic sliding free extension year, and housing support, seniors and adults with disabilities. So this is an absolutely huge area of state government spending. This here puts that into kind of comparison with other states. Again, this is Census Bureau data, so it allows a kind of clean comparison across states. And you'll see that the median state in America spends $23,410 on welfare per person in poverty. Minnesota, where are we? We have to go way up here. Second, $40,280 in 2022 on welfare per person in poverty. The second highest rate after Massachusetts in all of America. So I want you to remember, you know, when we're talking about reducing some of this spending and bending that line down, slowing that rate of increase, we're not talking about slashing things all the way back. Even if we drop down 10 spots, see back here, where Oregon, Maryland, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Hawaii, you know, these are not states where, you know, they're throwing people in poorhouses and things like that. You know, we are such an outlier that there is so much scope for reduction. This here shows you Medicaid spending per enrollee in 2022. Sorry to go back. And you'll see here, we are the second highest in the United States. $34,000 per enrollee for seniors in 2022. The only state higher than that is North Dakota, but that's what an oil boom buys you, I suppose. Medicaid spending per enrollee, people with disabilities, 2022. Here we are number one in the country. $53,000, and it's not even close. Look at the second highest one, New York. They're under $40,000. Let's say $38,000. So we're $15,000 above the second place state, which is blue New York, Blue New Jersey just behind them, states that are not renowned for being, penny pinchers when it comes to government spending. We are way, way ahead of them. We asked here, generally speaking, compared to other states, do you think Minnesota state government spends more or less on Medicaid than other states? 53% of Minnesotans got the answer right. We spend more. This is an interesting one. If you had to guess, where do you think there is most waste and fraud in state government programs? Welfare was the top answer, 29%. It's an interesting one down there, tax breaks. A lot of people will tell you, tax breaks for the 1%. It's actually 1% of Minnesotans that think that. Most of them are a lot more sensible, a lot more clued up, and have this kind of idea here. This should just kind of illustrate where things have been the last couple of years. So this here is Health and Human Services spending for the 2026-2027 biennium. In February 2023, so this is that historic, DFL trifecta, it was forecast to be $19.9 billion. By February 2025, the most recent forecast we have, that had risen to $24.1 billion. A $4.2 billion increase in 2 years. It's out of control. And so when people say to you, that all this budget deficit, it's because of the Trump administration, it's because of tariffs and all the rest of it, economic uncertainty, it's crazy. It's not true. It's homegrown, and it comes from this. So things that we can do to fix this, remove the public union pay system for PCAs. If you want, we understand, again, you've got to pay people what it takes to get them to do the job, but this is a cost that we just can't afford on autopilot. So $548 million, that saves you. Slow down the growth rate for home-based disability care, $260 million. So I want to say again, it's not about reducing the level, it's about reducing the growth rate. It's just about bending that line down. So that saves you $260 million. We've got here, slow down the growth rate. Again, the growth rate for home-based elderly care, $290 million. Slow down growth for customized living services. Again, slow the growth, $85 million. Align Minnesota's genuine continuous eligibility rules with federal law, saves you $25 million. This is one of those situations where you often find there's a kind of federal program that the states enact, and then certain states, Minnesota being one of them, go and bolt on all these extra things. If we didn't do that, we'd save $25 million. Asking Minnesotans on Medicaid to share some of the costs, $40 million that would save you. And then we've got here eligibility checks. So this is an interesting one. If we ask Minnesotans, if we tested eligibility, this kind of goes back to like what you have in the One Big Beautiful Bill, or HR 1 as it's known. This is one of the things that you have in there, and this is one of the big measures in there, is eligibility checks for Medicaid. So basically we propose something similar for the state. We think this saves you $290 million. And there's a lot of support for this as well. So again, we polled here support for requiring all Minnesota Medicaid recipients to live in Minnesota. 89% of Minnesotans polled support that. Then we asked, do you support requiring all Minnesota Medicaid recipients to have their eligibility reviewed annually, such as by asking them, are you still alive? 75% of people support that. So again, this is one of those things that kind of reaches across, cuts through, and gets support from people who are not, what you would call conservatives. So we got here things that this would save. Require Medicaid recipients to work, volunteer, or go to school. Again, this is kind of like one of those HR 1 measures brought down to the state level. Saves you $313 million. We asked support for requiring nearly all adults to be working or looking for work in order to have health insurance through Medicaid. 58% support. So again, this is not, a big number like you've seen with the previous two, but it's still a reasonable number, and you're still getting a lot of kind of moderate, independent, progressive Democrat votes in there. Repealing cash assistance changes. So this is another aspect as well. A lot of times when you talk about reforming these welfare measures, people will try and make out that you're looking to gut, some FDR era, program from, the New Deal or something. It's not true. A lot of these programs are actually a few years old. They've been around less time than me in this country, right? So repealing cash assistance changes, that saves you $99 million. That's something that's quite a new measure. This is crazy. No free health care for illegal immigrants through Minnesota Care. that saves you $238 million. This was to some extent enacted in the last session, so there's some progress on that. Kind of wacky that that was even a thing in the first place, but, you know, when you've got $18 billion, you know, you spend it, I guess. We polled on this. Do you support the state paying for free health care for illegal immigrants? 61% oppose that. So again, that's another one of these things that gets a significant number of moderate, independent, Democrat or progressive votes and brings them into that slice of the pie, brings them into alongside a conservative view. Again, the same thing. Repeal pandemic-era payments to childcare providers. Saves $260 million. So this is something that was put in place about 5 years ago. You know, FDR, this isn't part of FDR's 100 days. This is like 5 years old, right? And so, yeah, it's the kind of thing, it's like we have with the Obamacare subsidies that are a big issue now. Those were introduced in 2021. And they were extended in 2022 to expire by 2025. And now apparently the sky is going to fall in if we don't keep them ad infinitum. You know, well, it was Ronald Reagan who said there's nothing more permanent in life than a temporary government program. And, you know, I'm paraphrasing. But yeah, it's very true. These things here, you know, they've been around 5 years. They can go. Apparently the sky will collapse if they do. Same thing here. Repeal rental assistance program added in 2023. Saves $46 million. I want to make one other little point. Remember this, you know, childcare and rental assistance. These two things are a lot more similar than you think. So in Minnesota, we do have some of the most expensive childcare in America. You say childcare is expensive across the country, okay, but it's more expensive in Minnesota. Housing, more expensive in Minnesota. You go anywhere in America, they'll tell you housing is expensive, but it's more expensive in Minnesota. And that's the thing to explain so often. It's why is it expensive, it's why is it more expensive here? And very often what you see with these things, it's because of regulations. So one of the things that you have here with childcare, for instance, we have some of the most tightly regulated childcare provision in America. Now, whenever you say, and so that, you know, restricts childcare provision, pushes the price up, basic economics. And whenever you say that we need to ease some of these regulations so that more providers can come in and bring costs down, people accuse you, oh, you're not interested in the safety of children. But look at the other states. Look at states like Wisconsin. I'm sure everybody here knows somebody whose kids have gone to childcare in Wisconsin and survived. Because this is what they're saying. You know, it's always, oh, things will be terrible if we're even slightly more like another state. But, you know, other states manage without the level of regulation and the level of cost that we do. It's the same here with rental assistance. The reason that we have unaffordable housing in Minnesota is because we make it functionally illegal to build affordable housing with various taxes, fees, and regulations. I've written about this at length on our website. But it's the same thing. You amputate the bottom of the supply curve, and then you go, oh my God, everything's expensive. So we need more subsidies. So what they do is they don't treat the underlying problem, which is the shortage of supply. They treat the symptom, which is the high price, with subsidies. All that does is push the price up. So these two things, childcare and rent, part of the same problem. Public safety. This is, we won't spend too long on this necessarily, but this here shows you Minnesota's imprisonment rate versus its violent crime rate. And you'll see that the imprisonment rate drifts down and down and down, and the violent crime rate drifts up and up and up. I wonder if there's a relationship there. We think, actually, this is an interesting thing. We're different on this. We think that there should be more spending on public safety. So we actually propose an extra $200 million being spent on public safety. So if anybody saw this in the summer when we had that thing with the balls, this is where I took balls out of the thing. Thankfully, the balls have gone. They've been consigned to the dustbin of history. Cut community crime prevention and intervention program. This is the violence interrupters, some of whom you may remember were caught being involved in violence that they were supposed to be interrupting. Maybe that's one way of interrupting it. You know, I mean, I guess, you know, Wyatt Earp was interrupting violence in a sense. So $28 million that saves you. This brings us to energy. Again, this is an absolutely huge area. I'm going to start whipping through this now like the Gong Show. Wasteful energy expenditures. Support communities in adaptation for climate change. That saves you $579,000. Air regulatory program work in environmental justice. That saves you $5.4 million. Generally, whenever you hear the words environmental justice, grab hold of your wallet because someone's coming for it, right? Environmental justice, again, cumulative impact analysis. That saves you $2.5 million. How do you spend $2.5 million on that? Clean air resources teams. That saves you $1 million. And then the transportation electrification plan to promote the purchase of electric vehicles, $328,000. So crazy stuff. Community solar gardens, $1.9 million there. So wasteful energy expenditures, put all that together, saves you $12 million. Eliminate the renewable development count. This is just some kind of weird boondoggle. Get rid of that, saves you $20 million. This is the lightning round, okay? So I'm pretty good on time, actually. So lightning round here, cut broadband funding. This is one of those things, when you work in a think tank, sometimes people think differently. I'm not necessarily hugely opposed to some of this, but my colleagues hate it. So cut broadband funding saves you $200 million. That's rural broadband. Eliminate environmental building regulations. These are things that they have, I was talking about, that make housing more expensive. You scratch these, you save $200 million. Eliminate prevailing wage laws. This, again, is something else that pushes up things like housing and whatnot, housing costs. Now, the way that prevailing wage laws work is that when you're contracted, you have to pay whatever is the prevailing wage of some geographically defined area. So if you're paying some guy to stand next to a construction site with a stop-go sign, and he's in Pipestone, if that geographical area includes Minneapolis, you've got to pay him whatever it costs to get someone to do that in Minneapolis. So these things are kind of crazy. There was a study that somebody did in another state. We applied their methodology, and we think that scrapping this saves you $143 million. Legacy NRTF grants. This is something that my colleagues are very hot on. There's money that can be saved there, but you can't even really quantify it. But the total savings are $3.9 billion. Now remember what our budget deficit was. It's about 2 point something. So we not only have we closed the budget deficit, but we've cut spending enough that there is room for a tax cut. To cut some of those taxes that we saw at the start that were driving our GDP per capita down. So if you look at this here, public welfare spending per person in poverty. If we just bump that back down to the median state, I'm not saying this is realistic, but if we spent the same amount as the median state, we'd save $10.4 billion. Huge amounts of money. Now you think what the state budget is, like something like $30 billion, that's a lot of money. This is the biennial spending, so this is 2 years worth of spending, $66 billion there. If the average Minnesotan, that median Minnesotan, who thinks that 33% of all spending is wasted is right, and you eliminated that, you save $22.4 billion. General fund spending here, this is that chart that we saw before. Remember, all the way through this talk, we've been trying to bend that dotted line down. If we return it back to the level it was before the historic trifecta session, we save $5.4 billion. Now, this is in real inflation-adjusted terms as well. So this gives you enough scope, and I've got a little fancy spreadsheet model that calculates these things. And if you got that much money to play with, the 3.9 that we've saved, you can cut each one of these tax brackets by 0.5 percentage point, right across the board. And so that's actually, reasonable stuff. That still would not bring us too much out of the top 10 in terms of taxes. We'd still be way high, but at least we'd be moving in the right direction. And so that, on 43 minutes, that's not bad. That brings me to the end of my talk, and I am happy to take any questions that you may have. Thank you very much for listening.
Hello? There we go. A wonderful presentation. I've seen it before. There is another group in the country. You guys are primarily Minnesota. It's called Americans for Prosperity. I've been to a few of their events. I'd like to hear your opinion of your group and that group.
We're better, is the short answer. They're great people. We work with them. They're lovely folks. They are a C4, we're a C3, which means they can back candidates and we can't. So that's really the kind of difference. So we're non-partisan, and honestly, if the Democratic Seniors of America invited me to give this talk, I would give it to them, behind chicken wire, obviously. But they never invite me, Weird that. We're non-partisan. AFP, they can endorse candidates, but they do great stuff. And so one of the proposals that we have is for a TABOR, a Taxpayers' Bill of Rights, like they have in Colorado, which limits it's a kind of constitutional amendment that would limit the growth of state government spending to some rate. So there's different options. You can have one that's, population plus inflation growth, and that effectively caps per person government spending in real terms. You can, have a referendum or something to increase that. There's other things you can do, percentage of personal income, percentage of GDP, something like that. The precise nature of the TABOR matters less than that there is a TABOR. So it's kind of a fiscal rule like the Federal Reserve has a monetary rule. Not that they do all that good of a job with it. But AFP, they have a specific proposal for a TABOR, and so we work with them on that. They're good people. They're good people. If you get to go to their events, they're always a lot of fun.
So, Governor, is this on? Yes. Yeah. Governor Walz ordered a third-party audit on 14 Medicaid programs. How much do you have any idea of how much money that fraud entails? Has anybody looked at that?
Can I ask you two questions?
Sure.
When did he order this audit?
Very recently.
When did he become governor?
Many years ago. Yeah, no, I understand.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's great that he's had this kind of come to Jesus moment. I'm
not in support of.
Yeah, I get what you're saying completely. Talk about fixing the barn door after the horse has bolted. The horse has jumped on a boat and moved to Europe, and it's got a house that's been paid for probably by fraud or something. In terms of how much we expect them to find, you can pick a number really. One of the difficulties with fraud is that you're not supposed to know how much is going on. By its nature, it's supposed to be a difficult thing to quantify. You hear certain things from certain people who are involved in things that it could be a huge number.
Billions.
Billions. Joe Thompson, who's the attorney for Minnesota, he already says that it's up over $1 billion on the Walz administration. $1 billion. I write for our magazine. If anybody doesn't subscribe to our magazine, Thinking Minnesota, I think it's like $35 a year. I think it's value for money. I write for it, so I would say that. It's pretty good, and there is, so we talk in there, and a few years ago, I wrote an article for the 50th anniversary of Minnesota appearing on the front cover of Time magazine. Governor Wendell Anderson with his fish. Minnesota, the state that works. And this article, honestly, it's like, if you read it now, it's like uncovering it's like Osmandius, King of Kings, It's like uncovering this ancient old tome, or, the Rosetta Stone or something, because it talks about a Minnesota that just doesn't exist anymore. And there's a line in there where this guy, he was I think a New York Times writer mostly, but he came to Minnesota and wrote this feature. And he says, and this is almost a direct quote, "Politics is almost unnaturally clean. No grift, no corruption." We are now quite possibly the most grift-ridden, fraud-infested, corrupt state in the United States. When you think this is a state that gave the world, decent guys like Harold Stassen, Hubert Humphrey, and look where we are now. You know, the state government, when people are struggling to make ends meet, the state government's an open money trench for any chancellor who wants to stick their snout in it. And I think that's absolutely outrageous, and people should be angry about that, because they've been taken for fools, they've been exploited, they've been milked, and they should be bloody furious.
Just a quick note on what you said about...
I'm not running for office, by the way. Yes.
Proof of life, are you dead? I lived in Sweden and worked there for a while, so I get a small pension. Well, I got a form in the mail that's going to require proof of life before. And Sweden is not known to be, not a socialist country. So even they have those safeguards.
Yeah, it's one of those things very often. So I'd say two things about that. Firstly, Sweden, the things that people here believe about Sweden are crazy. Sweden's a socialist country. Sweden is not a socialist country. Sweden is a country that does have a high amount of government spending, not because it taxes the rich, but because it taxes everybody. If you look at consumption taxes in Sweden, the sales tax is massively high. So they pay for all this stuff by walloping their middle class in a way that nobody in this country would dare to do. So anybody who says we need to be more like Sweden, explain to people exactly what that means. The second point I'd make is that very often, progressives like to point to other countries because they do have this unfortunate view that everything is better somewhere else. They point to other countries and say, we need to be more like them. They point to Britain's National Health Service, which is a disaster, and say, we need to be more like that. We need single payer. Trust me, you don't. But it's the same thing with things like your pension thing, voter ID. This thing in America is like the worst thing that you could ever have, fascism or something. Most countries have it, and most countries get along fine with it. Don't believe the hype, as the old song goes. Yes?
Very quickly, you threw a lot of numbers at us. This presentation is on the website at americanexperiment.org?
I think so.
Okay.
I'm not entirely sure. One thing I would say in our magazine is there is kind of a magazine article version of the talk.
Okay, thank you.
And it's a lot more kind of concise than me waffling on.
And that magazine is online.
The
too.
magazine is online, or there's paper copies floating around at some of our events. Yes.
Yes. First of all, thank you for your comments. Very, very interesting. A lot of information, but very, very interesting. Thank you. There's been a silent migration of businesses out of primarily out of the downtown metro areas for some time now, for several years. And I'm curious what your comments on how we can stop that, short of, one thing would be to get rid of the entire Minneapolis City Council in some fashion. And probably the same thing for St. Paul. Be interested in your comments on that, please.
Yeah, well, when I first moved to the U.S., I actually lived in Lower Town in St. Paul for 3 years. When we first moved there in 2017, my wife and I, it was beautiful. I remember we went to see a St. Paul Saints game, and we got there early and we were walking around like Mears Park, and it was just gorgeous. It was like somewhere in Europe, people out on the pavements having food and drinks, having fun. In 2019, something changed. And businesses started to close more quickly than they were reopening. Crime started to get bad. Antisocial behavior started to get bad. And then in 2020, obviously, all that went off the charts. And by that point, I had a son who was just about to turn 1 year old. And I remember I took him to go shopping at Target on South Robert Street. And we were driving back up to our apartment, and we pulled up at the lights by Union Depot. And so I'm in the car, and I got my son like 2-3 feet behind me in the back. And there's some guy 5 feet away on the pavement having an overdose, while his friend's trying to phone for an ambulance. And I thought, this is too vibrant for me. I need to move. And I spent most of my life in London. I'm not someone who's moved here from Gopher Prairie and is stunned by the urban living. People will tell you this is city life. Deal with it. It's not city life. You don't need to deal with this. Is this what these cities were like 20, 30, 40 years ago? So, decline is a choice. And what I would say specifically about these cases, and I wrote an article in the magazine, plug again, about Lower Town and why it had gone down. You know, it's crazy things like yanking up the minimum wage, which makes it impossible for businesses to operate. It's crazy things like taking out all their on-street parking to build a cycle lane that nobody will ever use. Yeah, and spending A, a ton of money, and B, crippling your business at the same time. It's strangling them in so much regulation that they cannot operate. And it's also, very importantly, adopting an order of public safety which does not keep the public safe. If your public safety does not prioritize the safety of the public, you won't get a safe public. And that's one of the big problems that you've had in St. Paul. It's one of the big problems you've had in Minneapolis, because nobody wants to get, smacked in the head while they're out for dinner. Okay? And I see it, if you go to the suburbs now, I wrote about this on our website just the other week, an increasing number of suburbs, you have these suburban downtowns now. And you can go to Woodbury and have a nice night out. There's even a craft beer place in Invergrove Heights, which is quite nice. The sort of place that used to be downtown. Now all the suburbs are doing their own thing because nobody wants to go fooling around down there. And so what I would say, that what drove these places down was policy choices. And so reversing these policy choices is the first step to their recovery. But it's a necessary first step.
Got to push the button. Somebody had a question about quantifying the cost of the fraud. Just some of my own research that I've done and quick Air Force math. If we were to take 161 million state income tax filers last year and divide, let's just say, $1 billion, it would be over $600 per individual state income tax filer is what this fraud is costing you right now. Now you take out all the variables, people who get tax money back, which means anybody who's paying in is paying more than that. So if you're a household and you're filing as a household, that's over $1,200 per household so far. Just wanted to throw that out there.
Just a quick elaboration on that. The Minnesota Department of Revenue produces every couple of years a thing called the Tax Incidence Study. I would not recommend it as a light read, but it is a fascinating bit of research, and really we're very fortunate to have it in this state. And one of the things it does is it breaks down state income and various tax payments by income decile. So you rank all the households in Minnesota by income, and then divide them 10%, 20%, 30%, and that's your deciles, right? According to the most recent of these tax incidence studies, I think it was using data from 2021, the bottom 30% of Minnesota households by income take less out of the state tax system than they pay in. And that's probably gone up when you think of child tax credits and whatnot under the historic trifecta session. So, where we're piling more and more and more on fewer people, and then we wonder why they move.
Can I ask, how long do you think Target will survive in downtown Minneapolis?
I don't know. I mean, it's you'd have to ask them. I'm not a huge fan of Targets in the first place, so I don't know. It's rough, and I think they've ordered people to come back to the office now. Yeah. I mean, but Target's got problems, but I think Walmart's got problems. These things happen. It's just business, I don't know. I don't know how long they'll stay, is the honest answer. Yeah. I go down there now, and I feel like Charlton Heston at the start of that movie, The Amiga Man, where he's the last guy left alive. It's kind of it's a good place of peace and quiet. No, it's not actually. No. Anyway, sorry, that's a terrible suggestion. Anyway, thank you. Oh, I think I may have one more.
Yeah. I would just like to make a quick historical reference to show how far we've come in Minnesota. Many of you may remember back in 1966, the governor's race, Karl Rovag against Harold Levander. And the major issue at that time was some bad concrete that was used in the construction of Interstate 35 up by Hinckley, I believe. So that was the big thing. And I think Levander won based on that. But that's kind of where we're at now. how far we've come.
That's absolutely true. Funnily enough, there is a final plug for the magazine. I just wrote an article a couple of editions ago about politics in the 8th District in Minnesota, and I wrote about that race because the guy who was Rolvag's assistant was Bob Short, who was a big friend of Hubert Humphreys, who challenged Don Fraser for the Humphreys open seat and won, running to the right of everybody. Bob Short ran as a Democrat. Constitutional ban on abortion, slash income taxes, slash government spending. Different times. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, John. Okay, folks, we're going to do the drawing here. Yeah. Okay, before we do that, do we have any 2 cents for 2 minutes? Sherry. Okay. You want
You've seen me up here before. I talk about speaking proudly. I just wanted you to know that these are the 15 girls that on Saturday spoke up and were rewarded for speaking up for America. 3 winners, $6,000 was handed out to them. Actually, I'm going to the bank now to get the cashier's checks for them. But it was an incredible experience. The Center of the American Experiment really supports us, and our ads were in their magazine. Speaking of money, we raised $23,000 for this event. Looking for those girls was really a challenge, and I ask all of you to ask your families and people you know for encouraging girls to sign up for this. But we have room for 24, and here we're 15. You can just see they're just incredible girls, and the speeches were amazing. So thank you all for being part of this, and we'll do it again in 2 years.
Thank you, Sherry. Yes, sir.
Some of you may remember Deb Marie. Deb Marie came to all these meetings. She often sat up front here. She was a lovely woman, very conservative, and went to Tea Party Patriot meetings, other things, volunteered. Her funeral was a couple weeks ago. I grabbed some memorial things from her funeral there on the table back there if you'd like to grab one. The other thing I'd like to bring up is that Derek Chauvin, who got screwed, his mother addressed the Tea Party Patriots, which meet the first Thursday of every month. He has got a new lawyer, and they're within the next 2 weeks should be filing for a new trial. He has 2 motions. They're going to be before a new judge, so it's not the same corrupt judge that they had before. I have cards back there with his give, send, go information on it. He needs money. Grab one of the cards, send him some money. He's a great man who paid a huge price, and he's now trying to get back. We don't want a pardon. We want a new trial so that he can get a real trial, because a pardon just leaves that stink on you, and his trial was rigged from the beginning. So grab the cards or this for Deb Marie. They're on the back table.
Okay, thank you. Sally, you want to come in? Yeah, pick one. Or you're going to pick 2.
I'm going to pick 2.
Okay, the 6426 4.
I think it's an 8, isn't it? 8? 8,
Yeah.
4, 2, 6.
Okay, the last 3 numbers are 4, 7, 5. Okay, we have a winner. Come on up. And one last one. The last three numbers are 4, 3, 9. Yeah, that was the first one. We'll get it here in just a minute. Folks, also I've heard that Adam Schwartz is here, running for U.S. Senate. If you want to talk to him, he'll be right back there. Keep in mind that you are the best salesman of this organization. You bring friends. You talk to others about it, and we want you to do that. There's some business cards and member cards in the back, and help yourself. Try to bring anybody over 50. We're not meeting next month. We decided that a while back, that the weather's always iffy, and in fact we have a lot of seasonal commitments at the time, so we don't meet in December. So we're going to meet again in January and continue. Until then, keep the faith, keep warm, have a happy Thanksgiving, have a Merry Christmas, have a Happy New Year, and we'll see you in January. God bless you all.
I want you to know, I see you, paying for your coffee every morning, wearing that hat that tells me the infantry you dedicated your life to before I was even born. You may not know it, but I watch you with great admiration, and thank you for what you sacrificed. I see you in your full active duty uniform, walking through the store with your family, and I wonder how long you're here for, when you might have to go. I look at all of you and think, you must be some of the strongest people in the world. I see you on the TV. You're not just a face in the crowd of soldiers on the news. You're a person with a family who loves you, walking the dusty earth far away, so that I can walk in peace where I am. I see you at the memorial. You're not just a name, I know. You left a footprint of freedom on this earth. Imprints and sacrifices that are not just remembered, they're cherished. I want you to know I see you. I haven't forgotten you. I admire you. I pray for you, all of you. God bless you and your families.
Republican Seniors of Minnesota. For more information, please visit republicanseniorsmn.com. While visiting our website, you can click on the video tab to watch videos of past meetings. Also, look for other tabs that bring you to our live player and other video programs. Or, on YouTube, search for Republican Seniors of Minnesota